How can we create a safer environment for more accurate reporting by vulnerable community members and improve the accuracy in the categories of those affected by crimes as well? For instance, transgender individuals are matched in statistics.
I love that question because there's that old Mark Twain saying, there's lies, damn lies in statistics. I mean, sometimes we look at the statistics and we get a really skewed picture, and it's not surprising that biased crimes are underreported. I mean, it's one of the scenarios I talk about with my students is this guy O.J. Simpson, and those of you that remember what was going on in this country in 1995, remember that O.J. Simpson was not thought about as a great football player, but as someone who was implicated in pretty heinous murder. While that case was going on, the amount of domestic violence in this country being reported to the police skyrocketed. Did that mean that there was more domestic violence going on, or there was a change in awareness about what could happen if you don't report it? I mean, I would say probably the latter. The statistics on reported crimes get funneled to the FBI through something called the Uniform Crime Report. It's our sort of annual picture of crime in America. And we get some interesting pictures about trends. So the information about the increase in anti-Muslim and anti-Arab hate crimes after 9/11 comes from the UCR. The increase in the number of crimes being reported against immigrant populations, especially the Latino population, comes from that. I was just looking at the data from 2008, and for Eugene, the number of bias crimes reported to the police for the year 2008 is 23. So you can imagine that that number is probably pretty low, right? Especially based on the incidents that have been reported through other agencies. So there is this question, this is one of the things we do with the coalition, how do we get people to report these crimes so we get a better picture of what's going on? The problem is the numbers go up, right? So sometimes that's bad news, especially if I'm law enforcement, because I got more reporting going on, which means I got a more accurate picture, but all of a sudden I've got a trend. You know, if we can get people to report, that's good, but now we've got a problem that we've got to deal with. So some of that has to do with why people don't report in the first place. So one of the big, there's sort of two big areas that we're missing data on. One is crimes based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And you can imagine why that might be. People maybe coming from a rural area. So let's say I'm coming from Dexter, Oregon into Eugene to go to a club that I think is gay friendly, and I get beat up coming out of that. You know, do I report it? Do I report it? And all of a sudden my picture is in the paper. People are having a march, and people in Dexter had no idea why I was hanging out in that bar. Right? So I might not report it. So there's this great underreporting there. I may fear that the police share the same bias as the people who attacked me. So I don't report there. So that community is greatly underreported. Also, in immigrant populations who may or may not speak English, you know, I may come from a country where the police are corrupt. You know, if I'm an immigrant from Guatemala or Cambodia, I have a pretty good reason for not talking to the police, at least, you know, based on my cultural traditions. So in both those incidents, one of the ways of getting over that fear of reporting is to target those communities and sort of build bridges to those communities to get them to understand that the police take these crimes seriously. I mean, I grew up in this town called Stone Mountain. I always have to talk about how I got into this racket. The town I grew up in was the birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan. And when I was a kid, it was very well known that the police and the Klan were basically the same people. So if somebody's burning a cross in your yard, you don't call the cops because they're already there. You know, it's not like they're going to throw off the hoods and arrest themselves, because that would be redundant. You know, we've come a long way since then, including in Stone Mountain, that now has a black mayor, which is pretty cool. And the police are the people who are essentially in charge of the civil rights laws. I mean, they are the folks that are there to make these arrests when crimes happen. But there's a lot of perceptions about. I mean, I'm from Portland, but I think every city has a problem somewhere along the line, perceptions of police and the reality of policing, perceptions of the community about the police. You know, there's always a lot of dialogue that needs to be done on that. So anytime that we can further that dialogue, including community dialogues like this, and it's great to see law enforcement here, to make people feel like, wow, I really should report this. I'm not in Guatemala, or I'm not in Stone Mountain, Georgia, or I'm not in, you know, these places where the police aren't going to take this seriously. And when they don't take it seriously, because there are still places like that where that happens, that's when the feds come in. Because the federal government has an undercover law statute that when police are violating people's civil rights to make sure that those civil rights are taken care of. So there's a lot of work to do to build bridges, and ultimately that makes a stronger community because the police are us, right? They are members of our own community, and also helps people to feel safer about reporting these things so we can get better statistics. I hate to sound like a nerd who wants really good statistics, but I'd like to have a better picture of what's really going on, and if people are afraid to call their local police officer, you know, we really don't know what the picture is.
Let me just say really quick, I think one of the things that we've done too is acknowledging that sometimes you don't have to know who to run the numbers. At the U of O, you can report anonymously, and we just accepted that for some people, that's the only way we're going to get them to report, and we just have to be okay with acknowledging that that's a safe place as possible. So it kind of goes to around trans individuals and people who, how they access the information, and you just have to think about the many ways people need to get access to that. And sometimes people just call and leave anonymous voicemails on my voicemail box. I'm not going to tell you who I am, but this happened to me. And we document that. We include it in here, and I hope they see it. Because they didn't tell me who it was, but it was still in something, and it was official, and it said the University of Oregon on it, so it meant something.
So this next question is bringing it more to the personal. So how do we recognize our own bias, and how do we take responsibility for how we speak and react to offensive speech? And can hate be unlearned? And what are some of the tools for interrupting bias and hate?
Now it is becoming like Oprah. You know, there is a great professor at Spelman College in Atlanta who talks about biases like we talk about alcoholism. That an alcoholic can go for 20 years without a drink, but they still identify as an alcoholic. If I've got a bias, I can go for 20 years without saying or acting on that bias, but it's still in me. I'm always leery of someone who says, well, I'm not a racist, but... and then they say something completely racist. I mean, we've all heard this before, right? I am a racist. I grew up in a racist community. I learned that stuff. I'm sexist, I'm homophobic, I'm ableist. I mean, all those things I learned at an early age. And acknowledging is the first step, like being an alcoholic, to doing something about it. That I'm not going to try to fool you and say I'm not a racist. I'm the chair of the Oregon Coalition Against Hate Crimes. I am a racist. I have a little thing that I learned growing up in Stone Mountain, Georgia that still plays to this day, but I have the counter-learning from the good people around me that allows me to deal with that, just like the desire to take a drink. If anybody in the room kind of knows that feeling. There's another little voice that says, no, remember what happened last time you took that drink? And so there is this, you know, I was looking, there's some great literature that's out there, and one of the terms that pops up a lot is tolerance. And that you have to teach tolerance. I have a little bit of a problem with that kind of approach to it, which is, well, I don't like you, but I'll tolerate you. I really like the concept of, and I hate to reduce everything to a bumper sticker, but celebrating diversity. We are strong because we're a diverse society. So I do a lot of work with white supremacists. That sounds like a weird thing to say, but I spend a lot of time hanging out with Nazis and all kinds of people. And I had a teacher who had a problem in a classroom. She had two racist skinheads in her classroom, and she said, Randy, will you come out and talk to the class about the work that you do? And I love talking to high school kids because I wish when I was in high school somebody would have talked to me, because I wasted some really valuable years being quite stupid, you know, saying, oh, you know, racist things, and then going home and listening to Jimi Hendrix and not being able to make the connection between the two. He's pretty good for a black guy. No, he's the best. So it was a lunchroom setting, and of course, once I started talking about the work that I did, these two little skinheads were not happy that I was there, because they knew I was there because of them. And I was getting lots of sort of evil looks from these kids. And I didn't even have to talk about Hitler and his one testicle. It was a lunchtime setting, and you know, everybody brought a sack lunch, and one of the kids was eating a peanut butter sandwich, and the other kid was eating a bagel. And I just stopped and I said, hold on a second. You guys are the worst Nazis I've ever seen. Bagel, that's Jewish food, right? And peanut butter was invented by George Washington Carver, who's black. You guys are celebrating diversity. And they just stopped. What? You should be eating some sauerkraut or some waffles or some bratwurst or some good Northern European cuisine. I said, what kind of music do you like? Oh, I like heavy metal. Well, that starts with a guy named Chuck Berry.